Okay, guys, let's get going here. We got a quorum. Everybody have a seat. We've got a total of 7 bills or resolutions to take up here, and we're going to start with Senate Bill 675. We've got Comptroller Learman here, so we're going to bring you up, Madam Comptroller, and we have 3 witnesses signed up. This is Senate Bill 675. And I've got listed here Giovanni Hawkins, John Hart, and actually Mr. Hawkins has signed up twice. So
just 2.
Just 2. Okay, Comptroller, welcome to the committee, and you take all the time you need to present Senate Bill 675.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair, Madam Vice Chair. It's such a pleasure. I think this is my first time in front of your committee. It's a pleasure and an honor, and welcome to the B&T member too. Thank you, Comptroller Brooke Learman. I'm here to present Senate Bill 675, which is titled the Stop Scam Preparers Act. And that's exactly what we're trying to do with this bill. This is building on the foundation laid by the 2017 Taxpayer Protection Act. So I'm going to lay out the 3 things that the bill does and then why it's so important. First, this bill is about improving the communication and data sharing practices between our agency and the Maryland Board of Individual Tax Preparers, which actually resides not with us, but with the Department of Labor. So when we take an action against a tax preparer, we would, after this bill passes, be required to notify the board, and they would then be required to notify us so that we would know what each other was doing. Each of us has a role to play in protecting consumers, and the more effectively we communicate and share our findings, the better we can serve the people of Maryland. I also want to pause and note that we have spoken with the Department of Labor, and you will see that they are in support of this as well. Second, our bill aims to protect the tax preparer community. This bill will direct the Board of Individual Tax Preparers to develop a code of ethics that tax preparers will be required to comply with in order to get and maintain their tax preparers registration with the state. We'll be offering a slight amendment to ensure the process of creating that code of ethics incorporates the ability for stakeholders to provide feedback as well. I'm proud to say that this is an idea that came actually directly from the tax preparer community, and you'll hear from them later. And then finally, this bill provides the Comptroller of Maryland's Field Enforcement Bureau, the FEB, with new enforcement powers to charge violators and fine them for each violation. These enhanced penalties are aimed directly at disrupting the profitability of these schemes, and any resulting fines are directed to the Low Income Tax Clinics Fund. Some of the clinics that utilize this fund directly help actually victims of tax scams and help them recover from the experience of working with a fraudulent tax preparer. So that's what the bill does. And I want to just share a couple stories of why this is so important. So first, a story about Ella, who is a crab worker on the Eastern Shore, and she hired a pair of tax preparers to prepare her 2018 and 2019 returns. The preparers inflated her refunds and filed her returns using their own address, not hers, so that they would receive the check, and then they kept most of the check. The next year, Ella corrected her address and used a different preparer, a more reputable one. Those fraudsters then visited her at her job and threatened to have her arrested if she didn't hand over her refund check. Yes, true story. Thankfully, the Maryland Volunteer Law Services was able to quickly begin representing her, helping her repair her tax situation and connecting her with local assistance to protect her from further harassment. But situations like this are all too common and need to be stopped. A couple other stories, one other in particular, which I think is truly outrageous, and there are so many of them that really target our immigrant communities and our seniors. One that comes to mind is a scam preparer who was charging people $500 to make an appointment with my agency at our branch offices. Now, our office visits are free, but people didn't know this. And so someone set up a scheme where they were saying, hey, pay me $500 and I'll get you an appointment with the comptroller's office. And we figured this out, actually, somebody in our branch office, because she went to confirm the appointments and she was calling the same person over and over again for multiple different people's appointments. So really the creativity is mind-boggling. So we just continue to see too many Marylanders falling victim to scam tax preparers, the consequences of which can create truly lingering financial issues for people, many of whom are already experiencing hardship. So I'm pleased to be joined today by several people who have who have really important perspectives on this issue, and I urge a favorable report on SB 675. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Comptroller Learman. I should acknowledge we've got representation from the Budget and Taxation Committee in the form of Senator Shelley Hedelman is here visiting us. Comptroller Learman, do you have a preference as to who goes next, or
No.
you would just whoever grabs the mic first?
Whoever grabs the mic
Okay.
first.
All right, that will be me. Good morning, Chair, Madam Vice Chair, members of the committee. My name is Giovante Hawkins. I am the Executive Director of the Maryland Society of Accounting and Tax Professionals, which proudly serves 2,000 dedicated tax professionals in the state. These individuals serve hundreds of thousands of Marylanders, ensuring that fair and accurate tax services are happening. Today, I'm here to express support of Senate Bill 675. This is a pivotal piece of legislation designed to fortify our state's regulatory framework governing the paid tax preparation. This bill is really a bill of reform, guiding us toward a future where transparency, accountability, and integrity are not just ideals, but standards. Senate Bill 675 proposes a robust approach to safeguarding our citizens. And like Brooke said, immigrant citizens and senior citizens are targeted in these scams as big targets. It enhances the communication among regulatory entities, strengthens the enforcement capabilities against malpractice, and introduces penalties for fraudulent behavior, ensuring that Marylanders' hard-earned money is protected and deceitful practices are not happening. In our experience, we have observed the detriment caused to vulnerable communities by the few who exploit the system, diminishing the trust placed in our profession. Senate Bill 675 serves to mend these breaches, restore confidence, and elevate the tax preparation profession as a whole. We at the Maryland Society of Accounting and Tax Professionals asked for a favorable report on Senate Bill 675, and we stand ready to offer our expertise and insights as you deliberate on this vital policy that promises to enhance the integrity of our industry.
Okay, thank you. Sir, tell us who you are.
Oh, yes. Well, good morning, Chair and Madam Vice Chair. My name is John Hart, and I'm the Director of the Low Income Taxpayer Clinic at Maryland Volunteer Lawyers Service. Maryland Volunteer Lawyers Service is one of the oldest and largest providers of free legal services in the state, and through our LITC program, our Low Income Taxpayer Clinic program, we encounter many clients who owe back taxes to the state of Maryland, resulting in liens, levies, hold on driver's licenses, professional licenses. Many of our volunteers in our clinic actually do also come from the tax preparer community. And one of the most troublesome reasons why a client might come to our door is when they've been victimized by a fraudulent or irresponsible tax return preparer. Trusting the wrong preparer to handle their taxes can result not only in the loss of a refund, but it can also lead to severe penalties, years of identity theft, and in some cases, as you've heard, even further extortion. After the fraud is perpetrated, it's rare that any money will be recovered, and the victim still owes taxes. If their refund was inflated, then even if it wasn't completely stolen, then they must pay back any of the portion of the refund they were not legally entitled to. The comptroller can offer limited relief to victims in some circumstances, but either way, the scammer has made off with the money of an innocent taxpayer, or the state of Maryland is left holding missing revenue. Senate Bill 675 is a multi-part bill that, if passed, would greatly improve our state's ability to efficiently respond to reports of fraudulent tax preparers. It'll mean fewer cases of Marylanders falling into debt and into trouble with the tax system simply because they trusted the wrong person to do their taxes once. MVLS respectfully requests that the committee return a favorable report on Senate Bill 675. Thank you again for this opportunity to testify.
Okay, thank you. Let's take some questions. Senator Carrozza.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Madam Comptroller. Thank you for this bill. I feel a little bit like we're having a House Appropriations reunion here with Senator Hedelman and you, and we're together again. I wanted to ask you, first of all, I understand what this bill, is trying to protect, kind of looking forward in protection. As you well know, with the constituent casework you did before you were comptroller as a delegate and what we handle, when we do have a case like this, it is a very damaging case. It's really causing hardship, especially for the seniors. You see that. And my question to you is, even with this legislation in place, we know there's still going to be these sensitive cases. Can you just tell us, I would like just to have on the record that because a lot of us come to you with different casework, whether it's can you expedite my refund to something as sensitive to this. Does this have some staff designated for the prioritization of these type of sensitive cases?
Sure. Thanks for that question. Actually, and it is a very good question. So it depends. I'll say it depends. We have a huge, we have a staff, not a huge staff at all, but we do have a staff in our compliance team that works to create payment plans. We have an ombudsman, and actually because of legislation that you all passed last year, we will eventually hopefully have a taxpayer advocate office. We were requesting, the PINs weren't included in the budget this year, so we're requesting those PINs to be included. So as of July, then we would have a taxpayer advocate office, and those people will be designated to help in certain cases that are more challenging, like these types of cases. It also, I will say, is really important that folks who have been the victim of tax scams like this have, if the severity warrants it, have representation. So that's why our low-income tax clinics are so important. It's why the work that MVLS does is so important. We have a separate bill actually all about increasing availability of low-income tax preparer services, because so often it takes more than just our staff to be able to untangle what has been done. And so when we can work with somebody like from MVLS's team to untangle it, there's usually better outcomes. But yes, we do have people on our compliance team who set up payment plans. And hopefully if we get the PINs for our taxpayer advocate office, we will also have people in that agency or in that office within our agency who can work with these victims.
And it sounds like you're also confirming that those type of cases would be brought to your level.
Yes.
If not by us, by your own team.
Oh, yes. No,
Okay.
they definitely are brought to us.
Thank you.
Yep. Thank you.
Okay, Senator Hester.
Thank you. It's great to see you all.
you.
I had two questions. Are the folks who are the scammers, are they like mostly in Maryland? Are they all over the world? Like how are we tracking them down?
So most of these are folks who are in Maryland. These are, I have not heard of, you don't see folks who are, out of the country coming, sort of via internet coming in as much. At least that hasn't come to our attention as much. These are folks who are, the friend of a friend of a friend of a friend who said they did their taxes and you can do it, or they're hanging a shingle and claiming to be able to do something that they can't.
Okay, so it's good that right now they're all in Maryland.
Yes.
If it was to expand beyond the borders of Maryland, would this bill still enable us to go after them?
Yes. Yes. And actually one of the things that we do right now, and it's actually the only thing that the Office of the Comptroller can do right now to prevent this, is we can cut off people's ability to file online. So if we suspect a tax preparer of fraud right now, we can withhold their ability to file online. And that actually would go towards if you are out of the country or out of state, you're most likely filing online for somebody, even if you're doing it fraudulently. So that helps us stop that as well.
Excellent. Thank you
Yep.
so much.
Speaking of tax preparers, we've got Senator Brooks.
Yeah.
Thank you, Madam Controller, for the bill. One of the things that we thought could perhaps help prevent some of that, because those preparers, we have to have an EPIN, electronic files identification number, a P10, preparer's tax identification number. And my son was talking to me. He said, Dad, we got to get all of this information. And then we've got to be in full compliance as well. But the average Joe can just go right online and file. So that sort of lends itself right there to fraud and abuse. So the preparers have to go through all of this stuff to make sure that they're in full compliance.
Mhm.
But the average Joe can just go right online and file a return.
Right. Well, so you can go online and file your own return, right, without going through, which is how it should be because you're warranting for yourself.
Right.
But for a tax preparer, we are, what we're suggesting in this bill is adopting this code of ethics that the tax preparers want, so that in order to, if you are going to be filing for somebody else, in order for you to be able to do that legally, you are supposed to be registered with the state and
right.
whatnot. Yep, exactly.
Yeah. All right, thanks, Chair.
Okay, Senator
you.
Watson.
Morning, Madam Controller. Just one quick question to follow up on something you said earlier. So if there's a tax preparer who is doing something deceptive or fraud, you have the ability to limit their ability to file online, right?
Mhm.
What happens to the person who believes that this person is doing their job the right way? How are they protected? Because if they think that they're filing and it just comes to a halt as you're taking action against a bad actor, what is that person supposed to do? How are they notified, and what is their course of action?
Sure, it's a great question. So what happens generally is that person will be notified either from our compliance team. They'll receive an assessment. We'll notify them they haven't paid. Often what happens if we also publicize the list of people who we are prohibiting from filing online. So we put out a press release saying these tax preparers are no longer allowed to file online. And so last year we did this, and you will see in the news, I hired that person, and check in with them and they'll confirm they can't file online. And so there are a number of different ways that person is generally notified that their preparer that they've selected is not allowed to be filing. Yep. Thank you. Great.
Any additional questions for Comptroller Learman or any of the two panelists? Thank you, Madam Comptroller.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Hedelman, for coming. That concludes bill hearing on Senate Bill 675. Senator Bailey, we've got one witness on Senator Bailey's bill. Let's knock that out, and then we're going to go to Senator Elfreth right after that. I see her. She came into the room. We're going to go to Senator Bailey. That's Senate Joint Resolution 3. And Kaylin Gurka, you're going to be presenting on behalf of Senator Bailey, as I understand it. Okay. And we have one witness from the Chesapeake Bay Foundation, Allison Colden. That is the extent of the witnesses. And then we'll go to, again, Senator Elfreth's bill next. So, Ms. Gurka, first of all, why don't you introduce yourself for the record, and then we'll take it from there. Okay. You take the time you need to present the bill.
Thank you. Good morning, and thank you for hearing me today. My name is Kaylin Gurka, and I am a recent graduate of the University of Tennessee and Johns Hopkins University, where I studied environmental sciences and policy. I'm here today on behalf of Senator Bailey in support of Senate Joint Resolution 3. The Bay and its resources are an ecological and economic keystone for not just Maryland, but the entire East Coast. Its fisheries and water sport charm attract over $2 billion a year, and over 60% of migratory birds and fish depend on the estuary resources for rest, recovery, and reproduction. However, the bay we all love is threatened by the blue catfish and its expanding presence in the Chesapeake Bay watershed. I'd like to take a moment to explain just how devastating the uncontrolled population of blue catfish is for the state of Maryland. Blue catfish are long-lived, fast-growing, opportunistic feeders, consuming shellfish, crabs, other fish, and their eggs. These consumptive patterns directly decrease our commercial and recreational species populations and their abilities to spawn. Of the species in the Chesapeake Bay, 40% are facing decline from the result of invasive species. The characteristics of a blue catfish's consumption will negatively impact restoration efforts of native species such as American shad and species that support commercial and recreation fisheries in the bay, such as menhaden, a species which acts as a critical trophic bridge, maintaining stability in the food chain for fish both above and below. In 2011, commercial seafood species between Maryland and Virginia produced a $2 billion revenue, over $1 billion of income, and over 41,000 jobs. By 2016, these numbers were significantly reduced from 2 to 1.5 billion in revenue, from 1 to $500 million in income, and from 41 to only 30,000 jobs. Further losing this type of economic support would be devastating for one of Maryland's longest-standing occupations and traditions. In addition to their consumptive, invasive, opportunistic lifestyles, their habitat range will only continue to increase as they age, and their salinity tolerance increases. But the good news is there's a call to action with Governor Moore's joint Senate resolution. And by supporting the Commercial Fishery Disaster Declaration due to invasive species, assistance, protection, and rehabilitation for the state's fisheries is possible. Thousands of years of ecosystem dynamics have led to the diversity and lifestyle us Marylanders have branded into our identities from a young age. The Bay and its beauties are a source of local pride that need protection. Restoration efforts will ensure we never face the loss of our rockfish season, and that every young child will know the joy of catching and picking their first crab. We are lucky to have some control over our challenges and should not waste this opportunity. Other fish and water communities have not been so lucky. We have the chance to make a change. Please do not waste it. On behalf of Senator Bailey, I respectfully request a favorable report on Senate Joint Resolution 3. Thank
Okay.
you for your consideration.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we're going to go to our one witness here on the bill, on the resolution, Allison Colden, and you've got 2 minutes here on the clock, okay?
Good morning, Mr. Chair, Madam Vice Chair, members of the committee. My name is Allison Colden. I'm the Maryland Executive Director for the Chesapeake Bay Foundation, here today in support of Senate Joint Resolution 3. Our previous speaker did a wonderful job outlining some of the ecological and economic concerns associated with invasive species, particularly blue catfish and the northern snakehead. But what I'd like to do is provide some facts and figures to put a little bit more emphasis on the devastating impacts that these species can have on our bay ecosystem. So in his letter to the Secretary of Commerce, the Federal Secretary of Commerce, Governor Moore outlined some of the impacts that we have seen from these species on commercial and recreational fish in the Chesapeake Bay. But what struck me most from this request was actually the increase in blue catfish and northern snakeheads themselves. Since 2012, catfish harvest in the Chesapeake Bay has increased nearly 300%. And northern snakehead commercial harvest has increased over 1,000%. What that indicates is even if we do not have specific estimates of how many fish we have in the Chesapeake Bay of each of these species, that their range and their numbers are increasing dramatically to allow these increases in harvest that we're seeing. Some of the main challenges to getting as many fish out of the bay as possible are processing challenges, marketing challenges, and being able to harvest as many of these fish as possible. And we believe that the call to action in Senate Joint Resolution 3 to continue to pursue other federal funding opportunities that would support infrastructure and processing as well as marketing will be critically important to our efforts moving forward to eradicate these species from the bay. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for either of the two witnesses? Okay, seeing none, that concludes the hearing on Senate Joint Resolution 3. And we're next going to go to Senator Elfreth on Senate Bill 645. And Senator, we've got, let's see, got several witnesses. I don't know if you want to bring up, I see Mr. Feldmark, Joshua Feldmark, John Corrin, Dylan Baylor is back there. And then we've got two virtual witnesses signed up favorable, and one favorable with amendments. So Senator,
Perfect.
we'll bring our three live witnesses up and then we'll pick up our virtual witnesses after that. So
Okay.
Senator Elfreth, we're on Senate Bill 645.
Thank you. Good morning, Triple E. It's lovely to be here today. I know I have a couple witnesses, so I'm going to be brief and just tell you kind of the genesis of the bill. A few years back, this committee led the way on investing in a strategic plan for our park system. And because of that work, conversations I've had since then with the bike community made it pretty clear that we don't have that same strategic vision and investment for our trail system, both from recreational trails within our park systems, local parks, state parks, national parks, but also our bike trails and our bikeways. We did consider transportation quite a bit in the Great Maryland Outdoors Act, but we didn't think about it kind of outside of the park system. So this bill is very much the next step from that bill and taking into consideration greater investment, from a transportation standpoint, not just a recreational standpoint. So the Great Maryland Trails Act would bring the state agencies that have trails within kind of their planning. So Department of Transportation, Department of Natural Resources, Department of Planning, bring them together to connect Maryland's beautiful trails to create a statewide network, map trails and trail towns, promote trails statewide by establishing an office in state government dedicated to that work, and then working within breaking down those silos between departments and working together. The bill language wasn't exactly what we envisioned, and that's okay. It was a starting point. We want to continue a close partnership with in-state agencies. You're going to hear from two of them today. There's a little more work we need to do to kind of pull this together, but I can guarantee you after that negotiation happens, the final product will be innovative and implementable, which is exactly what we need here in Maryland. And we will have the final language from the committee shortly. So with that, Mr. Chair, I ask for a favorable with amendments report from the EEE Committee.
Okay, thank you, Senator. Who wants to go first? And again, you all are going to be on the 2-minute clock, okay?
Cool. Thank you, Mr. Chair, Madam Vice Chair, members of the committee, Dylan Baylor representing the Department of Natural Resources. Firstly, I'd like to thank the sponsors of this legislation. As Senator Elfreth mentioned, this committee passed the Great Maryland Outdoors Act, which was a revolutionary investment into our state park system. And we think that the intention of this legislation is to do the same thing with our trail system. Just as way of background, the Department of Natural Resources manages over 500,000 acres of land across the state and over 1,500 miles of trails across the state. And we are really excited about this legislation. I think firstly, we also want to thank the sponsors and the advocates for working with the department. We've engaged the Department of Natural Resources, the Department of Transportation, and the Department of Planning have all been in a lot of conversations about this legislation to figure out exactly how to make it work. And I think those conversations are still ongoing and we're still trying to figure it out. But I think all agencies are in the same line as we want to figure out a way to make trails become and remain a top priority in the state for all the various reasons that the sponsor mentioned. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions, but I wanted to be here today to indicate, the department's support of the legislation and the intent, and that we are working through amendments with all the various state agencies and the sponsors and the advocates to figure out a way to make this really work. And with that, we would request a favorable report with said amendments at a future date.
Okay, you want to go, Mr. Feldmark? Why don't you go next? That's fine. Sir, tell us who you are.
He'll be our cleanup batter. My name is John Corrin, Bicycle Advocates for Annapolis and Anne Arundel County, but today really representing a broad coalition of advocates at the local, state, and even national level. I want to just emphasize why this is so important. There's very few ways we can do one thing that reduces traffic on our roads, reduces greenhouse gas emissions, promotes health, stimulates our economy, and perhaps most importantly, provides equitable and affordable transportation options instead of driving a car for folks who choose to do that, or for folks who have no choice but to get around on foot or bike. When we say trails here, we mean paved trails used for transportation and recreation, and natural surface trails. We mean rural trails, suburban, and urban trails at the center of Baltimore or in the DC suburbs. A lot of local groups already have trail network plans. We have one in Anne Arundel County. Baltimore City has the Baltimore Greenway. Montgomery and PG have the Capitol Trails Coalition Network plan. Eastern Shore has a plan for a trail network. What we need here is to have the state knit all these plans together and then better position Maryland to bring more federal money into the state to plan, design, construct, and then manage the use of these trails. So we fully on board with getting this amendment to get the resources right and hope you'll support the bill. Thank you.
Okay, why don't we go to our cleanup guy?
Good morning. My name is Joshua Feldmark. I am here today representing Bike Maryland, which is a part of that broad coalition that you just heard about. I don't know that there's anything I can add about trails specifically, but I actually, in my mind, this is really a good government bill. When, some of you may know, I spent 12 years as the chief sustainability officer in Howard County, and the primary focus for me there were issues that cross departments. So things like stormwater, things like climate change, and trails, which you've heard all of the amazing things that trails bring us, is something that crosses across departments. And the one thing you need more than anything is a central place that's coordinating and talking to folks and bringing up this initiative. And that's as you've heard about the amendments that are coming up, that's where we're going to get. We're going to do it in a way that is, as you heard in the beginning, innovative and maybe even more importantly, implementable. I practiced that word like 10 times. This bill, I think, really is going to just be a catalyst for trails from Deep Creek to the Eastern Shore. So with that, I urge a favorable with amendments report.
Okay, any questions for the panel, including Senator Elfreth, Senator Carozza?
Senator Elfreth, thank you for the bill. Patty Stevens was in yesterday from the shore from Bike Maryland representing. And the need for this coordination is really important. I mean, I represent 3 counties and we got municipalities trying to do something, counties, how do we connect this? So that's within the region. And then when you talk about the state, I just want to comment as someone who, when I served in the executive branch, has some experience of trying to bring the various state agencies together. And then it's complicated by bringing the locals in. So I just want to, I guess an assurance from the Senate's sponsor that number one, that we also have some engagement from the governor's office in this, because my experience has been when you have when you're cross board with the different departments and agencies, and 2, that I see your letters of support from the counties and the municipalities, but I would like to an assurance that of their continued engagement through the entire process, because it's really where a lot of these issues where the challenges are. I represent 11 municipalities in 3 counties. So if you wanted to comment on either of their involvement, I'd appreciate it.
Well, I think it's spot on, Senator. We can't be successful if this is a top-down approach to the problem. And that's why we designate, our group is a little large right now, maybe too large. We're working on winding that back, but we wanted to be representative and make sure everybody had a voice, including local governments and including geographic representation across the state. So yes, this will not work if local governments aren't, equal footing seat at the table. I agree.
Okay, we've got Senator Gallion.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning,
Good morning.
Senator. So we've spent a lot of time in the interim working with Lower Susquehanna Heritage Greenway on some trail issues. So appreciate the work on that. So a couple of questions. I was just looking at the fiscal note. About how many pins or designated spots will that be in the?
That was a surprise to us, the way the bill was drafted, to take pins from other departments and put them in Department of Transportation. That was not our intention.
Okay.
I think no shade to the bill drafter. I think they just read into it. So that's what our amendments are trying to work on, trying to right size the number of pins. DNR is prepared to say that they only need 1 pin if we were to house it DNR. We're still talking to MDOT about how that would work. We're talking to Department of Planning. So I don't have a solution yet. It will not be an unwieldy number of pins to make this work.
Okay.
We just got to figure out the right home and then the right structure.
And that you kind of, I think, answered my next question, why that position would be in MDOT and not in DNR, but you're still going to figure that out through amendments, it sounds like.
It depends on trails, as Mr. Corrin said, serve multiple purposes. Recreation is one of them, and DNR currently has a lot of trails, but transportation is another important piece of this plan. So we've literally for 6 months been debating back and forth, where should this live? We're not quite sure. And then also, who wants to own it is also an important question. Department of Transportation has a letter of information in here. They're working with us, but we will figure that out.
Okay, and one last question. So, and this is a long-term goal, and I know it's going to take a lot of work with our federal partners, but I don't know how this could tie into it. A walking trail across the Susquehanna River. You know, they're doing the new, you know, with the trains, the new train bridge there. I don't know with the old one or something. I mean, that's I don't know if this new position could help us work with our federal partners, because that's really kind of limits a lot of things that we you know, I think 100 years ago they had something like that where you could walk across there from Havre de Grace to Perryville, I believe. So if this would help with that, that would be greatly appreciated.
Thank you, Senator, for bringing that up. Yeah, we are very, very focused on that Susquehanna crossing. There is no safe way for people on foot or bike to cross it. It's one of the few gaps. The East Coast Greenway is a route from Maine to Key West, and the Susquehanna crossing is one of the few gaps on the entire 3,000 miles. So we are very focused, working yeah, with the folks on both sides of the river and the regional folks to try to get a safe crossing there. This will certainly help. There's another bill that would help that as well.
The importance of that now when they're doing the trail with the train bridge, I feel like if something's not done now, it's never going to happen. So it's really high importance. So I appreciate you helping focus on that.
We're going to
Thank you.
continue to miss opportunities if we're not more strategic.
Okay, any additional questions for Senator Elfreth or the three witnesses? Okay, seeing none. Thank you, Senator Elfreth. We do have two virtual witnesses. I see. Well, let's start with Angelica from MML, because you're signed up straight favorable. Our other witness, Jane Sigler, is favorable with amendments. So Angelica, why don't you weigh in, and you've got 2 minutes, okay? And then we'll go to Ms. Sigler.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, everyone. Happy Friday. Mr. Chair, committee members, it's lovely to be back in EEE. Thank you for the opportunity to speak on this. And Senator Carrozza for your great question highlighting partnership with local governments. Angelica Bailey-Thupari for the Maryland Municipal League. We represent all 160 towns, cities, special taxing districts across the state. We are home to almost 2 million Marylanders, and we are very much in strong support of Senate Bill 645. As everyone has already said, connecting trails across the state is a really great idea. Spending time outdoors is healthy. Connecting people with our natural resources can enhance the health of our natural resources as well. And parks and hiking trails attract people to the area who might not normally come visit. So we see that more trails and connected trails could not only enhance the quality of life, but local economic growth as well. So we greatly appreciate the sponsors for this bill, and we ask for a favorable report. Thank you.
Any questions for our witness from the Maryland Municipal League? Okay, seeing none, we're going to go to Jane Sigler, who signed up favorable with amendments. Ms. Sigler, you've got 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Madam Chairman. We want to say that this is a really ambitious bill, that it's going to change the entire landscape of trail development, maintenance, and use in Maryland. Maryland's trails are very important to Maryland's equestrians, and I am here representing the Maryland Horse Council, which is the statewide trade association for the entire horse industry in Maryland. A recently released National Economic Impact Study found that almost 500,000 Maryland households contain at least one person who owns a horse and/or participates in equestrian activities. It also found that 10% of Maryland's households contain at least one person who trail rides on horseback. In our own survey, respondents reported riding on over 50 public trail systems spread throughout the state, and a list of those trail systems is in our written testimony. Many of these trails are multi-use, meaning that the same trail can be used by horses, bicycles, and people on foot all at the same time. Therefore, we were frankly a little bit stunned that equestrians were not included at all in this bill. And one example why that can be problematic is recently in one of the state parks, there was a new bridge designed and built over a creek. And after it was built, it was discovered that it was really unsafe for horses. It was too slippery and there weren't sufficient guardrails. The park people were very accommodating, but it cost the taxpayers additional money to basically redesign and rebuild that bridge. And that could have been saved had horse people been involved from the get-go. So therefore, we're requesting that the bill be amended to ensure that equestrian users have a seat at the table when decisions are made about trail design, development, maintenance, and use. And the specific amendments we are requesting are set out in our written testimony and in a markup of the bill that we have included with our written testimony. Thank you.
Okay, any questions for Ms. Sigler? Okay, seeing none, that concludes bill hearing on Senate Bill 645. Thank you. Which brings us to our next bill. We've got a Kagan-Reedy bill, which I'm very anxious to see them at the witness table on Senate Bill 762. Senator Reedy, you've been patiently waiting. And so why don't you come up and we'll have Senator Kagan and you, and then we do have some witnesses, favorable witnesses after that, but the two of you can lead off, unless you want to bring some folks up. Yes, okay, bring up, yes, Secretary, sorry, make you wait a little bit, but come on up, and Senator Kagan, why don't you lead off, then we'll go to Senator Reedy, and then we'll go to the Secretary, or however you want to do it.
Yeah, there we go.
Yes.
Kumbaya moment, Mr. Chair. For the record, Cheryl Kagan, very proud to
Before we
be-
go, I want, everybody's taking a picture of this.
Take a picture.
Great floor debate and working together. How about that?
There you go. And this is not about paint or nonprofit salaries or anything.
No doubt. Oh, wait, let me take that out.
Yeah, right. Colleagues, for the record, Cheryl Kagan, very proud to be the senator for Gaithersburg and Rockville. I'm really honored to be presenting this bill with Secretary Paul Montero from the Department of Service and Civic Innovation, and my friend and our colleague, Senator Justin Reedy. Behind me and with us are going to be a number of other witnesses. There's no opposition to this bill, and we've gotten great endorsements from everyone. And that's because this bill is important and it's free. It is important for our future. It's about educating our young people about civic engagement. And that is what Governor Moore's vision about our service year option created and launched last year. And for anyone watching at home or for any of you all, they've now opened the portal for participants and for employers who want to host a young person or an older person in the service year option. It's very exciting and making a big difference. The bottom line is we need to get young people involved in government and in their community, get them engaged in volunteerism and do it at a young age. The reason that Senator Reedy is with me is he had this image and this bill last year. The bill is a little bit different this year. It passed this committee and it passed the full Senate unanimously last year. And unfortunately, it didn't go forward in the House, but we decided that that we would tweak it a little bit and that I would try to kick it off this year. But we are both totally committed, as are a lot of young people around the state and a lot of organizations. So what does the bill do? It allows counties to register to have their schools, their high schools, be engaged in the option of having a seal, a civic seal of excellence. And the students would engage in various ways. They would get good grades in their civics classes, their American history classes, and others. Whether they take AP or regular classes, they would qualify through that. They would, of their service learning hours, which, as you know, is a minimum of 75 hours in the community, at least 30 of those would be done in a community enhancement project. And there's conversations about other aspects, whether it should require a voter registration effort. While I think we all agree that young people should register, that seemed like a bit more of a burden, and we think they can do that without being mandated in law. But this is an opportunity. Schools and students would both get visible recognition for their efforts, whether that's a cord or a seal on their diploma, a cord at graduation. The school would get a banner or a citation from the governor. We want to make a big deal out of it because young people who learn about civic engagement and volunteerism, as Governor Moore always talks about, service is sticky. And so we want it to stick with them their whole lives. So I'd like to defer to, I'm not sure what protocol is. I think we go to Senator Reedy first, and then we can take questions, but we have a bunch of young witnesses and grown-up witnesses about this this important bill. Senator
Okay,
Reedy.
Senator Reedy.
Thank you so much. And thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. Of course, I was here last year with a similar bill and you all were gracious enough to pass it. It was actually, this whole issue was brought to, I've always, of course, believed in civic engagement for young people. This whole issue was brought to me by a constituent last year before session. It came out of a recommendation that a whole task force worked on in the late teens Our one of our former colleagues was on that. I think there were some other folks from the General Assembly, and it was recommended to MSDE that we implement this kind of program. And then it kind of just lingered and didn't get implemented. Of course, we had a little something happened in 2020 that, slowed everything down for our education system as far as implementing some of these new ideas. And so coming back with it to be able to set up a great program for young people to be incentivized to get involved in their community. To me, understanding what your place in the world is as a young person and young voter is really important for the development of young people. We've heard a lot about Governor Moore's prioritizing service. I'll throw in a nice Republican name. I grew up, we didn't watch TV very much in my household when I was a little kid, but we always watched President Reagan and then President Bush on TV, and then it was President Clinton. Some of the ways that the TV was communicated with were different depending on who it was. But the point was, I always knew it was important to my parents at a young age to be engaged in what was happening in our government. And that translated into me being interested in learning more about history and government and politics. And that's sort of what led me to the point of becoming a state legislator. So for me, it's very personal that I always enjoy going to talk to student groups, to young people about getting engaged and not getting bogged down in some of the negative things we see in some of our national politics, but instead how you can really make an impact in your local community and how government closest to you really is actually the most important, and your engagement matters the most. So with all that said, it was great that Senator Kagan could kind of take the lead this year. We want to be sure we can get it across the finish line in the House, and look forward to something we can really be another thing for our kids to aspire to and be recognized for when they get engaged in our community. And so ask for your support again, of course. And with that, I'd be happy to take questions later, but we'll have the Secretary speak.
Okay,
Before I give the microphone to Secretary Montero, I just want you all to know what a privilege it has been to work closely with this gentleman on the launch of the program. He is so creative and passionate about this, and he's put together an amazing team. And so I'm just really honored and delighted that he also is with us today.
You didn't
So-
realize you had a PR person right there. That was good. That was actually, anyway, welcome, Mr. Secretary. Take the time you need to weigh in here, okay?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you very much, Vice Chair and Senator Kagan and Senator Reedy. I just had to be here today. We're very excited to support this bill. As has been described, our service programs that the governor launched last year are very much focused on having completers come out and emerge from our program with a better sense of civic literacy. In addition to the hard and soft skills they're getting through their service assignment, understanding the importance of their system of government and their role in it. Even as a member of a community, understanding the difference between a state senator and a U.S. senator and who their representative is, who their delegates are. That's an important thing for everyone to know, and it strengthens our community. The bill promotes community service and civic engagement by offering incentives to young people to be engaged earlier and involved in their community. We can see benefits to both. We also know that service is a nonpartisan strategy, as you can see from the panel here today. And by promoting these values for young people, we'll be able to develop and incorporate them into their personal and professional lives, whatever they go on to do following their term of service. And the legislation enlists these local school districts in promoting service and encouraging academic achievement. The objectives of the legislation are closely tied to the Department of Service and Civic Innovation and a strong step forward in strengthening communities. So I'm just glad to be here in support of the bill and hope that we can graduate more educated and informed citizens and members of our society that are educated about our system of government. So thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for our two senators or Secretary, Senator Carozza?
I think Senator Lewis Young had her light on first.
Okay, well then Senator Lewis Young. okay?
Civically kind we all
Yeah,
are.
very-
Deferring.
Okay, Senator Lewis Young.
This is a lovely idea, but I have to ask the question that immediately jumped to my mind. How do we tell these young people, we want you to be engaged, we want you to be knowledgeable, we want you to be prepared, and we have this lovely program for you. But if you are a member of your local Board of Ed, you can't vote because you're not ready. How do you reconcile these two things? Are we walking the talk?
Senator Lewis Young, I think that's a great question. And if only there was legislation in our committee that would solve that problem, that would be a good thing.
Senator Lewis Young, helping young people understand the appropriate time when they get to participate in the electoral process is also an important part of learning civics education. But you know that I think there's probably another bill discussing this issue. So
Actually, they're related.
They're related
Conceptually, they are related.
as a concept.
Okay, now we go to Senator Caruso.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for the bill. Really appreciate seeing the bipartisan effort here. But my question goes to the Secretary. This is really important for young people on how they first engage with civics education. And I respect the governor and this administration's focus, but I think it's also very important that the students, when they're first introduced to this, truly understand it as learning the basics, as opposed to pick a party, pick a team, get engaged that way. And so I guess I would like to hear, your vision of how to keep it nonpartisan, so they at least understand the basics before they then, decide to take a political direction. And so I'm very sensitive to that because I like the fact that it's being presented in a bipartisan way, but I also know that, I know that the questions that students ask me on when they want to become engaged, and I always go back to the basics. So how would you address that, Mr. Secretary?
Sure. Thank you for the question. And Senator Kagan's going to chime in too. That's one of the reasons I think the department is encouraged by this bill. The local school districts will set that foundation for members as they exit their local school system and graduate. We hope that they consider serving in the service year option, and they come with that foundation of the basics of understanding their responsibilities, how the system of government is set up, so that we can reinforce it and enrich it in a nonpartisan way. It would never be appropriate for us to present a biased view or encourage them to pick one side or the other. If anything, that's sort of the premise of our program. Is service is one of the last things left that brings people together, regardless of who they voted for. It doesn't ask what political persuasion you have before we say, let's clean up that park, let's feed that community. And we have to preserve that for this program to be, I think, what it was designed to be, which is at all points nonpartisan. Hopefully that's responsive to what
Thank you, Mr.
you were
Secretary.
asking.
If I could just add on, Senator Croza, and I know you asked the secretary, last year's bill, which was, again, we passed unanimously and which was really good, had a point system. And there were points for participating in a political campaign or being involved in Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts and all that. And for reasons of economic opportunity, because if someone needs to have a job because they can't afford the time to be in Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, whatever. And this, because of its community service, we thought we would take out some of the political stuff and some of the point system that also just seemed a little possibly cumbersome for a school. And so, so that's why it's streamlined. And again, the emphasis is on community. And Mr. Chair, if while I've got the mic, I just want to read, there are 11 other states that already have passed this law or are implementing it now: Arizona, California, Georgia, Nevada, New York, Ohio, Oklahoma, Pennsylvania, and our neighbor, Virginia. So.
Okay, any additional questions for our two senators or our secretary? Seeing none, we do have 6 live witnesses, and then we'll come back to Senator Reedy for his bill. But I'm going to reel off who signed up. Kinsley Potts, Jenny Massey, Alina Marielle Scott, Maroob Malik, Darren. Okay, we've got the secretary, Alexander Hussein Kale, and anybody I'm missing? We have Secretary Montero already here. Okay, so we've got 5 witnesses. Everybody have a seat, and each of you are going to be on the clock at 2 minutes, and that'll be the extent of the testimony on this bill, on Senate Bill 762. So who wants to lead off? Anybody want to grab the mic? Okay, let's see who's aggressively going to grab the mic. Okay, why don't you start right there? I'm looking at you.
Good morning. My name is Kinsley Potts, and I'm a ninth grade student at Garrison Forest School and an active member of the Maryland Civic Engagement Coalition Youth Advisory Council. I'm here today to advocate for the Maryland Seal of Civic Excellence. I'm what represents 25% of the leaders of tomorrow. A staggering 75% of youth do not volunteer. And as a whole, we mirror the civic and economical state of Maryland's future. Only 25% of the youth are currently prepared and equipped to lead and contribute to the civic and economic infrastructure in Maryland. My journey in civic engagement began when I first moved to Maryland in the 2nd grade. I was introduced to the Maryland community by participating at my school's local food drive. That event made me feel a part of something positive and much bigger than me. It also made me fall in love with the Maryland community. This experience opened my eyes to the impact we, as the youth, can have on our communities and beyond. It taught me the importance of taking care of my community because if we don't, who will? It is our civic duty to take care of one another and to shape the Maryland community into a place we love and are proud to call home. The Maryland Seal of Civic Excellence would honor our dedication to civic causes, symbolizing our commitment to public service. It would validate our efforts, inspiring others to start their own journeys in civic engagement and spreading positive change. The program would set a high standard, motivating the youth to enhance their civic understanding and amplify the youth's impact in our community. So I urge you to report favorably on SP 762 to kindle the civic spirit among Maryland's youth. Thank you for the opportunity to share my story, my passion, and for your ongoing support of the future leaders and youth citizens of Maryland.
Okay, thank you. Let's go next.
To the honorable members of the Maryland Senate Education, Energy, and Environment Committee. Hello, my name is Mir Malik, and I'm currently a junior at Crofton High School, and I'm a part of the Maryland Civic Education Coalition Youth Advisory Council. I'm here to express my earnest support for the Senate Bill 762, the Maryland Seal of Civic Excellence. According to the California State University in 2015, they analyzed a study with various variables of recognition, competence, efforts, and achievement goals through questionnaires. The most significant change was in student perceptions of the increased efforts they put forth in their work. This represents a favorable response to the student recognition and goals program they established for this study, and this is validated by the improvement in student performance. Yet the most essential question is, what caused the increase in effort? Because the greatest increase occurred after the first award ceremony. The data strongly suggests that the public student recognition motivated students to increase the efforts they put forth in their work. The awards were tied to the achievement goals increasingly led by extrinsic motivations. This bill is significant not only for me, but also for my peers that put time and effort volunteering countless hours and should be recognized by the community for making an impact in any way they can. This bill not only symbolizes service and volunteering, but it also demonstrates the next leaders of tomorrow who will vote and strengthen our democracy, and we must showcase those people among us. The Seal of Civic Excellence motivates students like me to become informed and be an active participant in our democracy. I urge the committee to support SB 762, reinforcing the message that the involvement of the youth is crucial for our state's democratic health. Thank you for considering my testimony and for the opportunity to express my views. Sincerely, Mir Malik.
Okay, thank you. Okay, and tell us who you are.
Good morning. My name is Jeannie Massey. It's a pleasure to be here, Madam Vice Chair, Mr. Chair, the esteemed members of the committee. I'm Jeannie Massey. I live in Washington County. I am a proud mom of 3, and I am by vocation and passion a teacher, a high school social studies teacher. And I am happy to work with the Maryland Civic Education Coalition and support Civic Seals. We support the SB 762 to establish a Maryland Seal of Civic Excellence. This bill represents an important moment in Maryland's civic evolution because we know that although Maryland was the first in the nation to establish a service learning graduation requirement in 1996, I imagine you can also share with me as a teacher
the experience of, while there are some kids like Kinsley who get hooked early, there are a lot of young people who feel a great sense of apathy and lack a sense of agency, and they're looking for reasons to engage and to feel pride and ownership in what they're doing in this world. So the Civic Seal would be not just an accolade, it would be a beacon of excellence that would reward students for their engagement, for their passion, and for their impact on the community around them. This would include social studies coursework, which has civics embedded in it. Did you know that civics is embedded in every social studies framework from pre-kindergarten through 11th grade world history? So we are teaching civics in Maryland, and yet the engagement piece needs to be strengthened. So offering this prestigious recognition would serve as a powerful motivator to young people, encouraging them to dive deeper into the civic life of their communities. This initiative is about more than acknowledgement. It's about inspiring an entire generation to become informed, active participants in shaping their communities in the broader societal landscape. By supporting SB 762, we will join a growing number of states that champion a future where civic engagement is the norm, not the exception. I respectfully urge a favorable report on SB 762.
Okay, thank you. Go on.
Chair Feldman, Vice Chair Kagan, and distinguished members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to speak in support of SB 762, which will strengthen our shared democracy and our democracy's future. My name is Lena Morielli Scott. I've been a dedicated civic educator for over 35 years. I'm now the director of the Civic Education and Engagement Initiative at the College of Education and the principal investigator of the new interdisciplinary Maryland Democracy Initiative at the University of Maryland. I also co-chair our coalition. One of the most fundamental ways to strengthen our democracy is through meaningful, equitable, and high-quality civics. And as you know, an informed and engaged citizenry is essential for representative government, for responsive government, and for strong communities. We have reasons to be concerned that so many Americans lack essential civic knowledge and skills, such as consensus building and information media literacy. And we know that K-12 social studies instruction has been marginalized to terrible effect. We also know good news. Students who participate in high-quality civics are equipped with the knowledge, skills, and experiences to successfully participate. And they have agency, the belief that their participation matters. Service learning is one of the proven instructional practices in civic education, and we believe that this new program, the Civics Excellence Program, will be a pathway to the service programs we heard about earlier today, a priority of the Moore administration, but also to lifelong service. The University of Maryland and our coalition stand ready to support MSDE and to support district leaders in crafting and developing their own distinct programs. In my written statement, I've suggested ideas, not amendments, we believe will help the program be measurable, impactful, and equitable. Thank you for your support of this bill. I urge its adoption.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Good afternoon, Chair Feldman, Vice Chair Kagan, and members of the Education, Energy, and Environment Committee. My name is Alexander Hossenkale, and I'm the current Legislative Chair for the Maryland Youth Advisory Council. Senate Bill 762 is simple yet intuitive in its necessity. In Maryland, so many students demonstrate dedication to civics, paving a pathway for not only themselves, but others to grow as children, community members, and future leaders. And yet, despite this evident dedication of students across the state, their civic contributions often go unrecognized. As Maryland continues to face a decrease in youth participation in civic initiatives, it is critical to support our students in just that to ensure the welfare of our state's future. In high school, I saw firsthand how hardworking and talented athletes, musicians, artists, and more were rightfully recognized for their accomplishments with wonderful applause. At the same time, I also saw how many of our equally hardworking and talented peers faced an empty audience when striving to improve civic excellence and engagement within their community. But even so, fiercely delivered their passion and accomplishments to a quiet crowd of few. Senate Bill 762 reflects, acknowledges, and admires the dedication youth have demonstrated towards civic engagement for themselves, their peers, and their future. Senate Bill 762 not only uplifts our current civically engaged youth, but also encourages and facilitates the pathway for onlookers to walk on. We're ensuring schools place an equal importance on civics so our future leaders are able to excel in a crowd of admiration. The council believes it is the duty of the Maryland General Assembly to pass legislation which will elevate, protect, and advance our younger generations to come. For these reasons, the council supports Senate Bill 762 and respectfully requests a favorable report from the committee. We thank you for your consideration of our opinion.
Okay, Vice Chair Kagan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If Alex looks familiar to you all colleagues, he was a page with us last year, and he's still around and still active, civically active, which is great. Kinsley, Mira, thank you for your leadership and for being here. I'm so proud of all of you. And Jeannie and Lena, you guys are a force. And so thank you for your leadership, Mr. Chair. Thank you for a moment of indulgence here.
Okay, any additional questions or comments for the panel? Seeing none, that concludes bill hearing on Senate Bill 762. And we're going to bring Senator Reedy back up here for Senate Bill 772. And we've got one virtual witness signed up, Senator. So why don't you lead off, and then we'll pick up the virtual witness who signed a favor with amendments. And so we'll start with you, Senator Reedy. Take the time. Senate Bill 772.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have a bill of equal bipartisan support and cooperation. I'm sure. Confident. Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, again, Senator Justin Reedy, glad to be before you to present Senate Bill 772, which would seek to require voter ID for in-person voting, but expands the kinds of voter ID that would be used beyond just sort of the traditional, what we think of when we think of a photo voter ID. It's common sense legislation. We could join 37 other states in requiring some form of identification at the polls to vote. One of the main concerns whenever we talk about requiring voter ID to ensure accuracy and ensure security on in-person voting, there's always been the question of we don't want to require just a driver's license or a government issued photo ID, because there are folks who do not have those or have trouble getting them. And so Senate Bill 772 provides a wide variety of options, from things like utility bills and bank statements to paychecks and other government issued documents. And of course, could use your driver's license or government issued ID. You can also use your voter notification card that you would have as a way to show your identification. As I said, there's 37 states now, according to NCSL, that require or at least request ID to vote. In our one person, one vote system, having intentional but reasonable security measures instills confidence in the sanctity of our votes and our system of government. Our mail-in ballots require sending in identification. There have been many cases in which people registered in multiple states can vote multiple times. I'm not here telling you that there are millions of people doing it, but it does happen, and this would help to cut down on it. But I think it also gives voters confidence. There have been cases where they've found very few, but they've found deceased voters that have cast a ballot. And so this gives voters additional confidence and security, and also make sure that we do check off the poll books properly. Our workers on election day do a great job, but there are times that mistakes can be made. So this helps to give an additional check as they check people in. So with that, I would ask for your favorable support and look forward to any questions you may have.
Why don't we pick up your one virtual witness, Nelda Fink, and then we'll open up for questions. Ms. Fink, I see you, and okay, there you go. You're on the 2-minute clock to weigh in. Favorable with amendments.
Yes, hi, I'm Nelda Fink from Millersville, Maryland Committee and Chair. Thank you for this opportunity to help improve the fairness and integrity of our elections. To be clear, a ID has not been required in the past. Only to state your name and address has been required in the past. I'm in favor of this bill, but it needs some corrections that will help establish more voter confidence than as it stands today. I caution with using the driver's license or a Maryland ID when establishing the voter's ID. The judge must also verify that the driver's license is a federally compliant real ID. And this requirement must be annotated in the bill and stated in the statutes. Maryland issues driver's licenses to immigrants, but the MVA document states it will be a non-compliant ID. So the statute needs to state that, and the driver's license must be state that the driver's license must be compliant, and what that looks like on the driver's license so that the judge knows the difference and can stop an individual who does not have a real ID. Also, a utility bill does not establish an ID or residence and should be removed from paragraph B2 II2. In fact, I believe all of paragraph B2 II should be removed. I believe it should be real ID or nothing. This then acts as a check and balance to the voter registration. No voting should be permitted if the identification cannot be established, not even provisional ballot, because eventually the provisional ballot may be counted, as mine was in 2020. Paragraph D should be completely removed, and this is supported by 16201, where it is being added that a person may not willfully and knowingly vote or attempt to vote under a false form of identification. So with those corrections, I request a favorable report. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Fink, for your testimony. Any questions for Senator Reedy or our virtual witness, Ms. Fink? Okay, seeing none, that concludes bill hearing on Senate Bill 772, which is going to, thank you, Senator Reedy. That will be up on your committee shortly. Got the final two bills are two bills from Senator Brooks. And why don't we start with Senate Bill 641. And we've got a sponsor panel, Lisa Radoff. I see
Yes,
Ms. Radoff,
they
who
can come on up.
I've been advised today's your birthday. Happy birthday.
I ask for a favorable report.
Yes. Catherine Flory, Jennifer Bevan Dangle. We do have one additional witness signed up, Rachel Jones from the Department of Agriculture, who is signed up favorable. So why don't you also come up, and then beyond that, we do have a couple of virtual witnesses, but we'll take this panel and then we'll pick up our two virtual witnesses after that. So Senator Brooks, again, Senate Bill 641.
All right, thanks, Chair, Vice Chair Kagan, and members of my great committee. Thank you for the opportunity to testify on behalf of Senate Bill 641. For the record, I'm Senator Ben Brooks, representing the 10th Legislative District in Baltimore County. The purpose of this bill is to modify the spay/neuter fund to allow for additional means for securing funding for animal welfare and improving access to crucial veterinary care. In 2013, the General Assembly established the spay-neuter fund with the goal of reducing the number of I guess we would say the percentages of euthanasia for dogs and cats surrendered to the shelter. This program is financed in full, from fees paid by pet food manufacturers who sell their products in Maryland. And since 2014, this fund has done wonders for the state. Shelters intake decreased by 27%, and shelters in euthanasia procedures has decreased by 62%. Moreover, this fund has been competitively grants this program has completed over 106,819 spay and neuter procedures. The success of the spay and neuter program is clear. However, the rise in inflation in the past few years has raised the cost of doing spay and neuter procedures. This has especially impacted the underserved communities. For example, in 2014, there were 28,710 euthanasia procedures before spay and neuter fund was widely implemented. The number has decreased every year until 2021, when the number of cases jumped by 15% from the previous year. Thus, as legislators, we should do more to make sure that the funds stay solvent, and this will help keep the escalating costs, help protect against the escalating costs, I should say. The $100 fee funding for the spay and neuter fund has not been adjusted since 2015, while the cost of doing procedures and paying veterinarian clinics staff has drastically increased. Many counties offer low-cost veterinary clinics, but they are not easily accessible to our constituents, thus defeating the purpose of the spay and neuter fund. SB 641 will close these gaps in care and funding. The bill will allow for the fund competitive grant program to consider mobile veterinary clinic service and routine vaccination during spay and neuter procedures. To pay for these new costs, the bill will allow for the fund to accept voluntary donations and raise the $100 fee paid by pet food manufacturers to $130 over a 3-year period. The increase only applies to those manufacturers whose gross income is in excess of $500,000. SB 641 will strengthen the state's capacity to provide essential service for pets through a fair and phased increase. The spay neuter fund has been proven to help keep animals from shelters. SB 641 ensures that this program is equipped to provide equitable access across to all communities. For that reason, I request a favorable report. And I'll turn it over to my panels now.
Okay, who's do we have a sequence? Okay, why don't you lead off? We'll go down the table and we'll take questions.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chair, Madam Vice Chair, members of the committee. Rachel Jones, representing the Maryland Department of Agriculture. This bill will create a means for individuals to make a voluntary donation to the Spay and Neuter Fund and change and increase the fees imposed on pet food manufacturers who register products here in the state of Maryland. It also codifies eligible services to be funded by grant projects and specifies that certain types of projects can be given additional consideration when being selected for funding. The Spay and Neuter Advisory Board, or as we call it, the SNAB, was established based on the recommendations found in the 2012 final report of the Task Force on Establishment of a Statewide Spay and Neuter Fund. MDA, in consultation with the SNAB, maintain the Spay and Neuter Fund and set standards for and approve competitive grants. We require a grant recipient to report specific data on how the funding is used as they determine necessary. The SNAB guidelines has created guidelines and applications to ensure that funding is being used to target the intended goals of reducing shelter intake and euthanasia rates. Since the program's inception, it has funded approximately 100,000 spay and neuter surgeries. Despite the setbacks caused by the pandemic, the program has continued to see positive results in intake, approximately 29% reduction in euthanasia and approximately 58% reduction numbers. The bill would provide a means for MDA to, the bill would require MDA to provide a means for individuals to make a voluntary donation to the fund on our website. It would also increase the spay and neuter fee for most registered pet products to $130 per product, scaled in over the next 3 years, which we think is much better than I think the version of the bill we saw last year. So the increased income to the program would make it very beneficial to offset the rising costs. We support that. It would also allow for mobile vet clinic transportation services to bring animals to the clinics. And if you have questions about the numbers per county that the MDA has allocated, I have that information.
Okay, thank you. Let's just go down the table.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Jennifer Bevan Dangle. I'm the Maryland State Director for the Humane Society of the United States. I do want to thank this committee for a few years ago extending the life of this critical life-saving program. We're very appreciative for your work to make sure that it is still a program before us. And I do want to thank Senator Kagan for her interest in the bill last year. As Ms. Jones mentioned, the fee increases that we were contemplating last year were not quite right-sized to economic realities. So we're very grateful to be back here this year with an amended fee increase that we think balances the importance of sustaining funding and increasing funding into this program with the sort of economic realities that are facing us as a state. My two colleagues here will speak to the importance of the program itself. I want to speak to the incidental costs because I know that raised some questions on the House side. The legislation as drafted does allow for clinics to use some of their funding under this program to go towards vaccines, routine vaccinations, and then these mobile clinics. The most important thing to remember is that this would be on a sort of grant by grant basis. So you're only going to see shelters and rescues that are running these clinics who feel that they desperately need that to be part of a successful program, applying for that under this grant. And the reason that we feel that this is incredibly important to include, on the vaccine side, there are certain vaccines that shelters cannot release an animal without providing that vaccine. Right now, the shelters have to cover the cost of that vaccine. And we have shelter partners who are saying they can no longer guarantee their ability to participate in these programs because of those incidental costs, because they can't cover sort of these unplanned for expenses. And so they'd rather not offer a clinic at all than be sort of financially at risk. And the mobile clinics, it's incredibly important to understand there are parts of our state that residents do not have access to a low-cost clinic. So allowing the shelters to get to them to, again, support the cost of that transportation is incredibly important. So we urge a favorable report.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Chair and Madam Vice Chair, and to the committee. My name is Lisa Radov. I'm the President and Chair of Maryland Votes for Animals. You've heard a lot of excellent testimony from our panel and our esteemed sponsor. I do also want to join with Jennifer Bevan-Dangle in thanking this committee for reestablishing this for another 10 years. In addition to being President and Chair of Maryland Votes for Animals, I do serve on the Spay-Neuter Advisory Board, as Rachel said, SNAB. And one of the things that we hear the most is that we need to provide these services to underserved areas. This bill would do that. It also would enhance services for the vaccinations that you just heard that are crucial and that many animals cannot be let out of areas, medical areas, without these vaccinations. In the 10 years, we've seen the need for these services increase as word is out about this program. We get more and more applications per year. Our goal is to give as many opportunities to as many areas as possible of the state to get these services. So without further ado, I would like to thank our sponsor, Senator Brooks, and request a favorable report. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you.
Good morning, Chair, Madam Vice Chair. My name is Katie Flory, and I am the Community Care and Advocacy Director for the Maryland SPCA in Baltimore City. And I'm also representing today PAWS, which is the Professional Animal Workers Society. I want to start off first, and I haven't written anything because I really like to talk to you from my heart. I have worked in this field for 18 years. I run clinics in Baltimore City in our underserved communities. We participate in the Spay and Neuter Fund, and I want to tell you how proud I am to be a constituent in Maryland and to know that we have this fund. But we are back to ask you for help. I personally transport animals to our Spay and Neuter clinic because many of the people that need this resource do not have transportation to get there. With our community clinics, our goal is to go into underserved communities where we're hearing that animals have never seen a vet, that they want to get spay and neuter, but they can't get there or they can't afford it. We are seeing, in fact, at this very moment, we have a dog in our shelter who's giving birth to 10 puppies as an accidental litter. That's 11 more animals that our shelter is going to need to care for the next 8 weeks until we can put them up for adoption. Providing more funds in this bill will help us to spay and neuter more animals. In 2023 alone, we saw our veterinary costs go up 17%. We are giving vaccines to every animal that comes in for spay neuter because it would be highly irresponsible for us to not do that. But we're eating those costs. So we are asking you to provide a favorable report and to help us do more of the good work that you know that we're doing and allow us to take this fund and use it more efficiently and effectively to help more animals and people in our community. Thank you so much for your time, and I ask for a favorable report.
Okay, Vice Chair Kagan.
Thank you. Two things. It's Lisa Radolph's birthday today. So in addition to all her work for animals, she's taken time out on her special day. So happy birthday, Lisa.
Wouldn't have it any other way.
There you go. Senator Brooks.
Yes.
To be clear, I wished you happy birthday when you walked up to
There you go.
before.
But the rest of the committee wants to send their love too. So, Senator Brooks, will the average Maryland taxpayer be charged this fee?
Okay, no, just only if you're buying food.
So if I'm buying
Yes.
cat food, then I will help contribute it through the food manufacturing people paying 130 rather than 100,000, but only if they earn more than $500,000, they will
That-
pay
that- that-
30
that is-
cents more.
That is
I mean, $30 more.
$30 more, and that's over the period of 3 years. It's like a $10 increase per year. So 30% over 3 years.
So if I don't have a cat and I don't have a dog and I'm not buying cat food or pet food, then there's no fiscal impact on me personally, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, just wanting to check since
Okay.
we continue to talk about taxes and fees.
Okay. Sure.
Thank you, Senator Brooks.
And I just, sorry if you don't, Vice Chair Kagan, this program for the last 10 years, taxpayers have not been paying a penny for this. So this would continue that for the next 10 years.
Okay, Senator Gallion.
Mr. Chair, and to follow along the lines of the fee questions coming from the Vice Chair. I'm kind of familiar with how the program works, but to kind of double down so I understand the fee system here. It says under current law and under the bill, the fee is paid by the person registering the commercial feed in accordance with collection and reporting guidelines. So, and it's the bigger, I guess the bigger ones like Purina, ones like that, right? So is that fee for every store they sell it in? Or is it for just one shot to the state for each one? How does that work?
Sure, Senator. So the pet food manufacturers, when they register their product with the state of Maryland, with our with the Maryland Department of Agriculture, they pay a fee per registered product. So it's a one-time fee annually per registered product.
So just those bigger companies?
Yes. So the way this bill is designed this year or is drafted this year, that the increased fee of $130 would only apply to manufacturers that bring in more than $500,000 in annual revenue.
Okay, so you said that, you know, we hear the side that, well, if I don't have a pet, I'm not buying pet food, I'm not going to be paying for this. So will the price of a bag of cat food, I have 2 cats at home, for better or worse, my wife and daughters love them. I kind of like them, but will that, when I go to Tractor Supply or the mill or wherever, will the price of that cat food increase because of this bill?
That's a decision that the manufacturers could make. Again, it's an incremental, it's a $10 increase per year over the next 3 years. Manufacturers could potentially decide to increase the cost and pass it on to consumers, but as designed, it's incremental, and because it's targeted for the larger companies, we didn't, as the bill sponsors have drafted it, MDA is prepared to support it.
Okay, and then for Ms. Bevan Dangle, just a question. So I mentioned our cats, and we've adopted them from the Humane Society. I imagine a lot of folks that do adoptions, one thing that might keep people from doing it is the concern of the cost of pet food. So was that brought into your thinking in this bill?
Certainly, and as a big picture, sort of the economic crisis is a significant reason why people on the whole across the board surrender animals. But when this fee first took effect and was phased in, we did not see an impact on pet food prices. When these fees have been established in a few other states, sort of following Maryland's amazing example, and we haven't seen an impact on pet food prices. So we feel, fairly confident that this much smaller increase will likewise not be reflected in an increase in prices, simply because that's the history we've seen as these fees have come onto the market.
Okay, we've got Senator Lucian.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As you might expect, I'm totally in support of this concept. I have a real concern about the methodology. Costs have gone up, and I want to get to that in a minute. We all know our shelters are overcrowded. In 2020, you couldn't find an animal to adopt because everybody wanted companionship. And now all of a sudden that people are going back to work, they're bringing their animals back, but that's not the only reason. 2 years ago, I knocked on 16,000 doors. I had plenty of conversations. And when someone had a pet, usually the conversation was about the pet, not my political theories. What I heard over and over again is the cost of vet care and the cost of pet food. That caused me to do my own analysis. I looked at my bills. My vet care costs have gone up 40% in the past 4 years. My pet food costs have increased 45%. My science diet bag has gone from $58 a bag to $84 a bag. So that's my concern. If people are telling me, I love my animal, I can't afford to take care of it, these costs are going to be passed on. And that's my concern. Meanwhile, I also checked out inflation because when I talked to my own vet about it, he said inflation, 3.2% on the average for the past 4 years. So totally disproportionate to the amount of increase in vet care or pet food. So my question is, have you talked to the Maryland Veterinarian Association? What part are they willing to play in reducing low-cost spaying and neutering costs? Because if you're not part of the solution, you're part of the problem.
If you don't mind, I'll start with answering that question. As I mentioned earlier, I am doing 8 to 12 clinics a year. Our vets are donating their time to provide that. The clinics that we offer are completely free. We know what you're saying. We are seeing it. We're seeing it in a number of different ways. We also run a pet food pantry through the Maryland SPCA, where last year alone, I gave away 1.8 million meals. We know that this is an issue, but if we do not increase the spay and neuter, it's going to become a bigger problem because there's going to be thousands upon thousands of more animals. And I think what I am seeing is, and I talk to people every day, I get it, and I love talking about their animals. They want this service. They just don't have the resources to get it. And we're doing our best to provide those resources, but without adding money to this fund, the resources that your shelters around the state can provide continue to become lower. And we're going to see what you're seeing more and more every year unless we stop it now. So that is why we're coming back. Prices are higher. I have a number of dogs myself. I contribute to that fund every time I go. But with or without this fund, we're going to see those prices rise. We know we are in a time when we are seeing inflation. We're trying to find ways to balance it. And if we can provide more money in this fund to the state, you will see the under-resourced communities start to be able to provide this service. So I hope that answers your question, but I know, I feel you, I'm right there, and this will help us see less animals coming in.
Do you have any additional questions? Or do you have a follow-up, Senator Lewis? Your light's still on. Okay. Okay, any additional questions for this panel? We do have 2 virtual witnesses I want to get on here. Thank you for your testimony. I'm going to start. We've got Savone Akagi signed up favorable with amendments, and then we do have 1 virtual witness unfavorable. So we'll start with you, Ms. Kagi, and you've got 2 minutes. Okay, signed up favorable with amendments.
Thank you, Chair, Vice Chair, and members of the committee. I'm Savon Coy, representing the Pet Food Institute. We commend Maryland for the great success of the spay and neuter program at its current funding level. As of December 31st, 2022, shelter intake has been reduced by 27%, and shelter euthanasia has been reduced by 62% since 2014. We support reasonable expansion of the program, but funding routine vaccinations goes well beyond the goal of reducing shelter intake and euthanasia in Maryland. And we cannot support increased taxes on pet food makers who solely bear the cost of funding this program. This bill would raise the annual registration cost of each product by 30%, imposing a significant burden. We urge the committee to reject tax increases on pet food makers who already pay a $50 per product registration fee on top of the current $100 per product spay and neuter tax, which generates nearly $1 million a year. This is about 10% of pet food makers' budgets for all taxes and fees, a significant share for just 1 state, and the highest per product fees in the nation. A tax increase would reduce product registrations in Maryland, limit consumer choices, and reduce pet food sales in brick and mortar stores. We respectfully request that money be appropriated from the state budget to pay for program expansion and ask that the committee remove the spay and neuter tax increase and instead provide additional ways for Marylanders to contribute. Such alternative funding sources are already used in Maryland for other programs, like the tax donation checkoff for the Chesapeake Bay Fund and the Chesapeake Bay Trust license plate. Similar mechanisms, as well as an appropriation from state funds, should be used to provide the funding to expand the spay and neuter program. Thank you for the opportunity to share our views, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you. Are there questions for our witness? Okay, seeing none, thank you for your testimony. That brings us to our final witness on this bill, signed up unfavorable, Louise Calderwood. Ms. Calderwood, let's see if we can find you. Okay, you've got to, Ms. Calderwood, you got to put your video on, turn your video camera on. Okay, I think you're okay.
There we go. Did it allow me to come in there?
Okay, we have you. Now you've on the clock for 2 minutes and you're signed up unfavorable, okay?
Thanks so much, Chairman Feldman and Chairman Kagan, members of the committee. I am Louise Calderwood. I'm with the American Feed Industry Association, and we represent the U.S. animal food industry, including pet food manufacturers. We agree in principle with the Maryland Spay and Neuter program's intended goals of targeting spay-neuter support for pets owned by low-income citizens. And historically, we have supported extensions of the program and applaud the program's success. We only oppose the mechanism of funding the program, and we're perplexed why taxpayers are not contributing to this valuable social program. We commend the Maryland legislature for the $200,000 appropriation to the fund last year as an appropriate means to support a worthy program which addresses a pressing social welfare need. Pet food manufacturers are concerned about the plight of unwanted pets, and we praise Maryland for the existing grant program, which is clearly meeting the first stated goal, targeting assistance to low-income communities and populations to the maximum extent possible. Based on reporting from the Maryland Department of Agriculture, it can be seen that the fund, as it's currently structured, is meeting its intended purpose of decreasing pet euthanasias and the population of homeless pets in shelters. If the legislature feels the need to expand the grant program beyond its initial targeted purpose of reducing the number of pet euthanasias, we encourage the legislature to examine different funding sources, as my colleague Sivan has just pointed out. Beyond the proposed $30 per label increase in fees paid by pet food companies. Maryland citizens can increase the funds available for spay-neuter procedures for pet owned by low-income families through the existing or new charitable resources rather than increasing the burden on businesses who do not contribute to the problem of unwanted pets and are already supporting pet shelters. The AFIA opposes any increase in the fund beyond the existing $100 on each product, and we urge members of the Senate to explore alternative ways to expand the program. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for Ms. Calderwood? Okay, seeing none, that concludes bill hearing on Senate Bill 641, which brings us Senator Brooks to the final bill for this morning, Senate Bill 916. We're going to bring.
Chair, I do have a panel.
Yes, we've got Lisa Radoff again, Jennifer Bevan Dangle, and Dylan Baylor. And then we've got one virtual witness as well, and that will be the extent of the testimony. So Senator Brooks, again, we're on Senate Bill 916.
All righty, Chair Feldman, Vice Chair Kagan, and members of my committee, thank you for the opportunity to testify on behalf of SB 916. For the record, I'm Senator Ben Brooks, representing the 10th Legislative District in Baltimore County. Here again, thank you for the opportunity to testify before you on SB 916, that's Fish and Wildlife, Endangered and Threatened Species, Definitions, Petitions, and Regulations. The purpose of this bill is to codify the way in which the Department of Natural Resources identifies and reviews endangered and threatened species. As of November 2023, the Maryland Wildlife and Heritage Service has identified 526 native Maryland animals that are most in need of conservation efforts. These creatures play a crucial role in the state's ecosystem. However, the current mechanism that DNR uses to identify these animals or internal and uncodified. SB 916 will ensure that the Maryland's best practices for endangered and threatened species are reflected in law. The bill will codify the scientific evidence requirements for petitions to list and delist an endangered species. This will not only make the petitioning process more transparent, but it will also ensure that the agency lists and delists animals with an evidence-based process. Further, the bill requires DNR by July 1, 2026, and at least every 5 years to review and update the animal and plant protected species list. Having up-to-date information on the state of an endangered species allows the agency to better protect them while efficiently distributing its resources. Lastly, this bill will give more comprehensive definition to fish and wildlife. The Endangered Species Act is unclear whether sea life like sponges, corals, and barnacles are considered protected creatures along with certain other species. Despite this ambiguity, it is still necessary to safeguard these creatures, which is why DNR currently interprets the Endangered Species Act to include all animals. SB 916 will fix the lack of clarity and ensure that these kinds of species remains protected. The proposed changes has little impact on the current day-to-day operations of DNR while ensuring that the agency best practices for endangered and threatened species are clear and codified. For that reason, I'm requesting a favorable report.
Okay, why don't we go through the panel? Dylan, you want to start?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chair, Madam Vice Chair, members of the committee. For the record, Dylan Baylor representing the Department of Natural Resources. Firstly, I want to thank the sponsor of this legislation and the House sponsor as well, both for the leadership on this issue and for working with us through the interim to draft this legislation. I'll be brief. As the sponsor mentioned, this is a codification of all of our current practices with relation to threatened and endangered species and how we go through the process of monitoring and listing those species. And we really appreciate putting it in statute so that way it is in that there are teeth for future generations and that it remains through the future. But again, this will not have an impact on the department itself because this is codifying our current practice. And as the sponsor mentioned, there are over 500 Maryland threatened or endangered species listed and only 39 at the current moment of federal threatened or endangered species. So I just want to give a huge shout out to the Wildlife and Heritage Service staff at the department who do this work every day and work every day to protect the biodiversity of Maryland. And again, we appreciate the sponsor for the leadership on this bill. And with that, we would respectfully request a favorable report of Senate Bill 916.
Okay, thank you.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Jennifer Bevan Dangle. I'm the Maryland State Director for the Humane Society of the United States. I do appreciate the sponsors bringing this bill, and to give you a little bit more background on its origination, the National Council of Environmental Legislators issued sort of their thoughts on best practices. And some of our legislators were a bit dismayed to see that we were dinged for not having these in statute. Maryland is a fiercely proud state, and we have a lot to be fiercely proud of, including the work by our wildlife and heritage staff at DNR. So it is important to codify this bill to make sure that our best practices are sustained and also that we're seen as doing this incredibly important work and meeting these standards, which have been lifted up as best practices. The 5-year review in particular is incredibly important. It allows us to identify any fluctuations in species before their population drops to sort of unsustainable levels where we couldn't intervene and protect them in a timely and efficient manner. So there are key provisions in here that if we were to lose them by not codifying them, by seeing, a turnover in how the agency is operating, we would really lose some of our best defense against losing some of our most precious species. So we urge a favorable report, and we are comfortable with the DNR technical amendment on the definition.
Okay, Ms. Radov.
Good morning again. Lisa Radov, Chair and President of Maryland Votes for Animals, here in support of SB 916. You already heard very detailed and excellent testimony from my colleague and DNR, happy to be on a bill with DNR with the wonderful work they do. We are dedicated to maintaining the integrity and strength of species and habitats throughout our state. And we feel that the best practices in this bill would do that. Not only would be protecting species and habitats in our state, but all of our neighboring states, because obviously animals and habitats extend beyond borders. So with that, I just want to thank Senator Brooks for SB 916 and urge a favorable report.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for the panel or for Senator Brooks? Okay, seeing none, thank you.
Chair, I just
Testimony.
wanna, may I mention
yes.
that there was one
Yeah, we have
amendment.
one. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, go on. You have
Yeah.
an amendment?
Yeah, there was one amendment submitted, but it was a technical amendment and you should just
Okay,
have that.
great.
Yeah.
We do have one virtual witness from the State Bar Association Animal Law Section. Frankly, I didn't know that they had an animal law section, but that said, Kim Fullerton. Is Ms. Fullerton online? Okay. So Ms. Fullerton from the Maryland State Bar Association Animal Law Section, welcome. You've got 2 minutes and you've signed up favorable.
Good afternoon. Thank you, or morning, I suppose. Thank you for having me. I'm also a animal law professor at the University of Maryland and chair for the American Bar Association's Wildlife Subcommittee. And so today we're just talking about best practices for maintaining and updating our state list. I'm going to talk about why that's important at the state level, federal level, and internationally. But first, I want to talk about who decides what an endangered species is. When we use that word, what does it mean? And again, there's 3 levels. Internationally, there's the International Union for the Conservation of Nature. That's an international organization of 170 countries. And they're the gold standard. They have what's called a red list. It's an inventory of all the species and what their conservation statuses are. And then federally, we have what's called the Endangered Species Act. It lists species that are threatened with extinction, and it has some statutory provisions. And then what's great is Maryland. Maryland keeps our own list as well. And so going into why this is important at the state level, we have incredible creatures in our state. We have the smallest and rarest sea turtle in the world. We have the largest mammal, the blue whale. And we have the monarch butterfly, which is just a beautiful creature. So we have to protect them. It's important at the federal level because these lists are not the same. As our sponsor mentioned, Maryland identifies 566 species that we in our state recognize as threatened with extinction that are not, and only of those 566 species, only 7% have made it to the federal list. So that means that there's over 500 species that we acknowledge as being threatened that are not protected by federal statute. And then internationally, this legislation is important because the University of Maryland serves as secretariat for the IUCN, which is an incredible honor. And so we already have a seat at the table. And by providing the data that is collected through this bill and through these best practices, we're able to best protect Maryland resources. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for Ms. Fullerton? Okay, seeing none, that concludes the bill hearing on Senate Bill 916, and that concludes our bill hearings for today. Folks, it's about 10 to 11. Why don't we come back here in 10 minutes at 11 a.m. and we have 7 bills that either we held yesterday or didn't get to.